They say if you live one place long enough, you are that place. My name is Anthony Desiato, and I've lived in Westchester, New York my entire life. This season, I'll be telling my county's story through her comic shops, the quintessential stores of the area and the era that are now no more. If you like what you hear, please consider joining the My Comic Shop History Patreon page. You get access to a ton of exclusive bonus content, including the My Comic Shop Book Club, Beyond My Comic Shop, and My Superfan History subseries. Thanks to everyone who has already signed up. One of our podcast sponsors is a family of film festivals, the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City, the Point Lookout Film Festival on Long Island, and the Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival in Asbury Park. Find them all on Film Freeway, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The 2020 seasons for both Point Lookout and Hang On to Your Shorts are open for entries. Use the discount code SJRHOTYS2020 when you submit. Also, be sure to visit iTunes or ashareduniverse.com to tune into the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast. My Comic Shop History is sponsored in part by Acme Comics, the oldest and largest comic book store in Greensboro, North Carolina. Acme is a full-service, multiple Eisner Award-nominated business. Visit them when traveling or online now at acmecomics.com. And be sure to follow store manager Jermaine Exum on Twitter at Lord Retail, and tune in Tuesday evenings for his early new release comics reviews. Welcome to My Comic Shop History. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. This week, we turn our attention to booth 95 at the Empire State Flea Market in Port Chester. Booth 95, of course, was Jay's Comics, run by the one and only Jay Meisel. For this episode, I'm very pleased to welcome to the recording studio here today former Jay's Comics customer, Jonathan Baylis.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been like 2 years that we've been trying to set this up, and we finally got you here.
It's true. Well, I was very upset that I was not in the documentary. So, I was like, now, here's a question. So you say it's booth 95. Is that the booth that he ended at?
That's the one he ended at.
That's when he ended, because, so I was born in the Bronx. I came to Westchester in 1977. I was 4 years old. And I'm pretty sure that when I was 5, I went to the Empire State Flea Market, and at that Empire State Flea Market, in a corner that, like, he wound up at the opposite end of that flea market in Port Chester. But when I started, he was in a different corner, and it wasn't just Jay. Did I forget? Did you guys talk about his original partner at all?
No, not for the documentary.
Not for the documentary, but you know about it.
But I know he had, there was a partner original. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was Jay and Shelley, and my mom liked Shelley because he super friendly, boisterous guy, also from the Bronx, like my mom. And then there was Jay, and Jay, was this little angry Jewish guy, like if you, it's a comic book shop, and if you touch the comics, he would get very upset. He's like, what? If you bend it, you buy it. If you rip it, whatever. But that said, he was a teacher. So on the flip side, as grumbly as he was, or curmudgeonly as his outward presence, inside, he's a great human being and a teacher, and really wanted kids to read these comics and grow with these comics. And I just happened upon that booth at exactly the right time. Like I had come away from my safe place back home. I was in this new place, Harrison, New York, going to this flea market, and here was this guy that was selling comic books. And the only place I saw comic books before was in like a newsstand in a bodega. And I learned how to read by my mom putting Spider-Man comics in front of me. But Jay would have these bags of, like, it was probably 10 comics, and it was probably like 10 beat up, comics that nobody bought or whatever, shoved in a $1 bag. but that bag was like magic to me, right? Like I remember, some of my first Jack Kirby comics were in there. I remember The Demon. There was a lot of horror stuff. Like I wonder if I was just attracted to horror books, and that's what I chose. Like maybe there was a superhero bag and a horror bag. I don't quite remember, but it was The Demon and Tales of the Unexpected and House of Mystery. And there were these like big 100-page specials, and I just remember, going there and flipping through all those dollar bins and buying these books and voraciously reading them, and like any comic shop, seeing older comics on the wall, like you do in a regular storefront. For him, it was a booth. It was like a booth in a flea market, but he still had comics up. And I remember really desiring some of those books on the wall. And I think when I got older, I did buy them. Did you have that experience? Did you go into comic shops and you were like, oh, I covet these books on the wall? Like that's a special thing.
That was never really a huge thing for me, I have to say. No, I mean, I think it's something that I appreciate more now when I go to some of these stores and I see these really rare vintage books, displayed nicely. I think, that really makes more of an impression on me now. As a kid, I can't say that was so much of a pull, but it's great to, hear you describe Jay. I mean, I've talked about him on the show over the years. And, for people who've been following what I do, of course, Jay, he was featured in my first film, my comic shop documentary. He had his own little segment called The Jay Show. And then, of course, he was the subject of the spin-off short by Spoon, the Jay Meisel story,
right,
which chronicled his final days at the Empire State Flea Market.
Yes.
So, again, he ran this booth from 1978 until 2013 when the market closed. So 35 years he spent there. It's great to hear you describe
I was literally there every one of those years.
Well, so, so one of the reasons I've been really looking forward to speaking with you is this episode on Jay's Comics in this season on Westchester's comic shop history is a little bit of an outlier for me, because all the other stores that I've been talking about are stores that I shopped at,
right,
either on a weekly basis or on a more casual basis. Jay's Comics was a little bit different because I met Jay through Alternate Realities.
Right.
By the time I started working at Alternate Realities, which was 2002, Jay had this routine where he would come in, I mean, like clockwork, Mondays and Thursdays. Occasionally he would miss a day if he had a doctor's appointment or something, but he would usually try to plan around that. Like he was there pretty much without fail. Mondays and Thursdays he would come in, he would have lunch with the store's owner, Steve Odo,
right,
and if there were books that he needed for customers, he would try to get them from Steve, and they would just kind of sit and chat. Like he had this great routine, and that's where I met him. So I knew Jay through his visits to Alternate Realities, and then it was honestly a few years after that where a few of us took a field trip to the Empire State Flea Market and finally saw him at the booth, saw him in his element. And pretty much any of my other visits to the booth over the years would be just to visit him, just on a social basis.
And how long would those visits last?
Maybe about an hour or so.
Interesting.
And then of course I go back to film for the documentary. So, and while I was there, I would almost always try to buy something. But again, my point being, I wasn't really there primarily as a customer.
Right.
So I'm so curious to learn what it was like to be a regular customer at Jay's Comics.
So, I mean, I want to say, like anything in life, I mean, it evolved over the years. I mean, I was just a kid, and my mom is, maybe slightly a bit of a collector, hoarder, if you want to be if you don't want to be nice about it. She was very good at going to the flea markets, finding good deals, buying a lot of stuff, and she knew that I knew how to be respectful to Jay and to Jay's booth, and Jay would allow me to hang out there. And it wasn't like I would just go get a couple of books and then leave. I would sit there for a while, and this was for years. So it was like this, just this thing that I did. And I would be, there were, like any store, a ton of long boxes, and I would flip through the long boxes. Now, one of the things you notice when you go into Jay's booth is that, there's an old-timey classic sense to him. in 1978, he was not selling all those posters, like
the movie posters.
Yeah, that was something that happened later. Like, it was just comics. It was just comics and comics related things when I started, but he always played, it used to be cassettes, and then it moved on to CDs, but it was always, jazz standard classics. I mean, he loved all the standards and Broadway shows. He had a really good taste for good old music. And but one thing that he did have since the beginning, he always had photographs. He had photographs and autographs to go along with those photographs, and so he was just really into movies and movie history, and that is something that from day one. I mean, I was a very nerdy kid, a bullied kid, and so I had comics and I had television, and those were my friends basically. So being a kid in New York in the 70s and 80s in front of a TV that only had 5 channels, they would only show classic movies, all the time. It's classic movies. So I know a lot of classic movies. And so Jay and I, even though we were decades apart, we spoke the same language. And we were both Jewish, and we had family from New York and
of the Hebraic persuasion. As he says.
Of the Hebraic, yeah. Whenever I would leave Jay's booth, he would tend to say "Sei gesund," go with God, right? Like that's.
He told me go in health. There was always some debate whether he was. I mean,
Yiddish is that way.
Okay.
I think Yiddish is that way. Depending how you say it. But I always thought it was go with God. But I mean, he's not a godly kind of guy. I think he probably puts the Rangers above God. But I think he probably would mean it have good health.
Right.
But I believe it means go with God. But yeah, we spoke the same language of comics and classic movies, and I really liked it, and I think he really liked that about me. And as I grew older and wanted to read instead of just buying these dollar bags, and I wanted to read the same book every month, he would start to put books aside for me, I think everyone who goes to a comic shop regularly has their own pull list, right?
Sure.
That's just a standard thing. And, when I went away to sleepaway camp for, a couple of years in a row, I think that's when that started. He would put the books aside for me, and my parents would come pick them up, and they would send them to me, and and then after that, it just became a regular thing where I would go to Jay's, and he would have all my books for me, and over time, I think my visits became less and less as I got older, but he always kept the book. So instead of every week I got a little bag, it would be every couple of months I got a bigger bag. Or I went away to college, and then I would get 3 or 4 bags, but he always kept it for me, and I always paid him. But my visits also grew longer as well. I think when I got a car and could drive, on the weekend, there wasn't, there was no internet. There was no, the kind of entertainment that people have today. They didn't have when I was a kid. And I would just go to visit Jay, and I would, he would have 2 stools in there, and I would sit on one of the stools, and but he would also use it like a break. He would trust me enough that he'd go to the bathroom, he'd get a soda, he'd always bring a soda back for me. He'd get something to eat, and we would just sit there and talk. And I knew the business, so if people were asking how much this was and how much that was, I could tell them. And I felt we had a very close familial relationship, to the point that I would come home from college and, I would see him, what used to be like a handshake and as I gesund, I would give him like a kiss on the cheek and a big hug. And, I really love Jay. And, even when his store closed in the flea market, I would go to his house and his garage, to see him. Like it was, it's more, at this point, Jay is getting me books that I barely have an interest in reading anymore, but I just wanted to keep the relationship going. The guy's getting me Hulk. Like I haven't read a Hulk book in, I don't know how long, but it's like, if Jay's getting me the Hulk, I'm going to buy the Hulk.
Did you ever like literally fill out a pull list, or was this just him pulling the stuff that he knew you wanted or thought you wanted?
No. I'm an anal guy in the collector respect. And
so this was like a formal pull list.
No. Oh yeah. Typed, printed.
All right.
Yeah.
That you brought to him.
That I brought like,
because he wouldn't be typing.
He would not be typing. And then he would take my list and then he would write it out. Like he would take my list, he would write it out, in his own handwriting. And he would know like things like, I want anything Frank Miller was doing, anything Neil Gaiman was doing. Like, he would know these things. And to this day, some random, Neil Gaiman thing comes out from another publisher. I would show up and he'd be like, oh, I got you this Neil Gaiman thing. And I'd be like, all right.
It sounds like you guys were very much on the same page right off the bat.
Totally.
So my experience was a little bit different. And I've talked about this before. The first time I met him, I was probably filing back issues at Alternate Realities that first summer. And, he probably came up to me and was like, what are you doing, kid? Or, something like that. And, there is that gruff exterior. And I wasn't like so offended or anything like that. But I can't say I had the warmest initial impression of Jay. But, over time, and it didn't take long, you really come to see what a sweet person he is and how much kindness and what a warm heart he has.
Yeah.
And so I quickly became a fan. And, to this day, he's one of my favorite people. We always talk about, at Alternate Realities in particular, about, what a family we became. And the owner was very much like a second father to me.
Sure.
Jay, like a grandfather. Very much that type of relationship. But... And not to knock my own family, but I feel like I have a closer relationship with Jay than even my own grandparents.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I put out a collection of my So Buttons comics, a couple of years ago, and Jay is in that dedication. Like my grandparents aren't in that dedication. They're long gone, but Jay, I see him as, my dad was not into comics. My dad took me to, every great movie I saw as a kid, but he was not into comics. And, maybe my mom was a little bit, but I think I was definitely a loner in just the true knowledge of comics, the history of comics, all this kind of stuff. So Jay became that sort of comics mentor figure, in my childhood. So yeah, he's totally like like another dad, a dad of comics.
So he would recommend things to you?
He would recommend things. I was very knowledgeable about what was going on, and then as I got older, my tastes went a little more independent. So I'm not sure he always knew the things that I was interested in. But but he certainly knew that I was really into all that Vertigo stuff and Sandman, and but he's classic in knowing all the old Marvel and DC stuff. He, like, I don't know if he's ever read a Harvey Pekar book or any kind of an autobio comic other than what I would give him, if he's even read what I've given him. I don't know that he's read my stuff. I don't, I've given it to him, but I don't know that he's read it.
And that was one of my questions, actually, because you are a comic book creator. You do this autobiographical comic, So Buttons, right? And I was curious if you showed it to him and what reaction he had.
I showed him. I think I gave him little. So what I do, I guess I call them mini comics. I think a regular comic book person, who just gets superhero books, like maybe they would see these things and call them ash cans, right? Like,
Okay.
So it's basically like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper folded in half. And there are a lot of there are a lot of people who go to like San Diego Con and New York Comic Con, but there are all these smaller indie kind of conventions, small press conventions, and that's where I go and sell my books. And at those places, you'll see mini comics. So I would give him some of my mini comics, and I don't know if he ever really had a response to them, but I gave him the book, and I'm pretty sure that he was affected by seeing the dedication in that book. So that I know touched him, and it touched me that he was touched. So I don't know that he then went on and read the whole book, but I know that he was touched by the dedication. So I don't know if that's his thing. I mean, I think he, even as an older guy, he still liked a good superhero book.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you've already touched on this, but yes, he's still with us, very much, a man out of time, and his tastes, whether we're talking about movies or music or comics, run very much, to the classics. And he's very specific about that. It's funny, you mentioned at the top, you're mad that you weren't in the documentary.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing where it's like, I was limited. I had to rely on Jay in terms of,
I know, I can't believe he didn't bring me
and it's
up.
the sort of thing,
literally his oldest customer on the planet.
Yeah, it's like, Jay, who are the customers I should talk to? I don't know. So it was very much that. So the customers who ended up in the movie, they're in there because they happened to be at the booth while we were filming. Like, nothing was set up in advance because it's kind of tough. I asked him too about like any former students, because again, he was the social studies teacher in Harlem for decades.
Yeah.
And it would have been, I would have loved, to talk to a former student of his. But it was a little hard to get that information out of him. So it certainly was nothing personal.
I don't know that he's that, that kind of guy, right? Like, if he didn't think of me, I mean, whatever, I'm like, I don't know if tooting my own horn is the right expression, but like, if he didn't think of me, I mean, I was never aware of him, ever talking about his students or telling me that like, oh yeah, like this student contacted him or that student contacted him. I don't know that he loved that job. Like he did that job, and I think he even quit before he could get like the maximum retirement or pension or whatever. I think he, at just one point, he was just like, I'm done. Because, I mean, I can't imagine what it would have been like trying to be a teacher in New York City, and like a New York City that, like New York City was tough in the 70s and 80s. Like that was a really tough time. I mean, the money was not coming into the city. People were leaving the city. I mean, that's the whole reason I even went to the Portchester market, is because everyone like me left the Bronx and moved to Westchester. Right. So I don't know that was like his favorite job. But I mean,
I get that sense as well.
But there's something about him that is teacherly, right? Like, like that's he wants to teach, and he likes kids learning, which I think is probably why we probably talked more about movies and music more than comics in that booth. Like, like I bought my comics. I mean, it was funny. I mean, towards those last years, like I said, like when I went to college, and I really didn't go back to Westchester very much when I moved into the city. It got to the point where he didn't even add up the books anymore. Like, I got my books, I added it up, like I knew what discount he would give me, and I would just go, like, here's the money. Like, that's the relationship he had. Like, he trusted me that I wasn't going to screw him, and he knew that that I was getting a deal and whatever it was, and it was that very trusting relationship. But we didn't talk about the comics that I was buying. We talked about like we're flipping through his movie posters and talking about great old movies and these autographs, and I wasn't much of a sports guy, but he was a rare person who's into hockey.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
no, it's true.
I'm like hockey. I don't know how you.
And
you
he
know,
would sell the sports memorabilia, autographed jerseys, things like that.
yeah.
You know, I know it's true. You don't often see that combination of comics and sports.
Right. I mean, I do, though. You know, there was that time in the 90s, right, where you had where trading cards were also really big. I don't think Jay was big with the trading cards. I mean, he had them out, but I don't think he liked them or cared for them. But other stores had, baseball cards, but they also got into the non-sport stuff, which is when I worked at the Topps company, I dealt with that stuff. I was doing like Star Wars cards and X-Files cards and, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's funny. Initially, I was going to ask you, like, why did you end up at Jay's Comics instead of other stores in the area? But that time period, I mean, there weren't a lot of other comic shops, right? When was it that you said you moved up to Westchester? 77?
It was 77. And right, if that store started in 78, I had to have been one of the first customers. Like it just had to be. I'm trying to remember any other comic book stores. I mean, you had mentioned that right, there was Heroes World and the Galleria, but that wasn't even there.
The 80s,
that wasn't even there in the 70s. There was a shop for a few years on Mamaroneck Avenue, down a little down from the movie theater. I feel like that guy had a cat in there that would piss on the comic boxes. Like that guy was a total fucking mess. But I don't really remember a lot of other comic shops. And the booth in the flea market was good enough. I mean,
right.
At the time, all I was reading was Marvel in DC, and that's all really all there was. I think comics were leaving the newsstands in the 80s when it was like the shift over.
We have the birth of the direct market.
Into the direct market. It gave me everything I needed. I grew up in Harrison, and there was certainly no comic shop, I think, ever in Harrison, though I think there's one now, right? Like,
there is, Oh Yeah Comics.
Oh Yeah, which is partially owned by Mark Waid, right?
He is one of the owners,
one of the greatest comic writers of all time.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, there was no comic shop in Harrison. So I think Portchester was as close as it could be, and I think it was like 5 minutes away. I mean, you're only 10 minutes away from it right now.
That's true.
It doesn't exist anymore, but...
Hop right on 287, you get right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, once other comic book specialty shops started opening in the area, we talked about this beforehand off mic, but I know you explored them, but was there any temptation to have one of those stores be your regular spot, or
Never.
was it always going to be Jay?
It was always going to be Jay. It was, like I said, Jay is like a family member. I mean, I think even, he enjoyed talking to my mom. Like I'd be there for like an hour or 2 hours, but then my mom would show up and then they would talk, and my dad doesn't talk very much, but like even they would talk, I
met your parents at one of the film festival screenings.
I sent them to the screening. I sent them to the screening.
No, I was so glad that they came.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They're extremely supportive people. They will go at anything. I mean, to this day, I feel like since my dad, my brother and I, we were in the band, and we're in dramas and plays and all that stuff. They spent a lot of their life going to all these, high school shows and concerts and stuff. My parents still go to like high school concerts. Like, it's like, they're putting on Phantom of the Opera in Nyack. I gotta go see that. I hear it's very good. It's very good. But I mentioned that, like, there's a documentary about Jay. Well, they got to go to that. Of course, they got to go to that. So
I got to say, it's I've made 4 documentaries now. They've all gotten into festivals and stuff, which is nice. By Spoon is the only one that's won. It won Best Documentary twice.
Yeah,
and and I don't say that to toot my own horn. I mean, Jay, as far as documentary subjects go,
that's a guy.
You can't ask for much more.
No, it's funny. I have never heard him say that By Spoon thing. I never heard By Spoon. I was like, By Spoon? What is By Spoon? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, well, as you saw in the movie, and specifically the bloopers, he doesn't even really know where that comes from.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, he was a fantastic subject. It's funny, though. So, someone listening to this might be wondering, well, you're doing an episode on Jay's comics. Where's Jay?
Right.
So I tried valiantly, I think, to have Jay on the podcast in season 1 of My Comic Shop History. And it was a little tough to really get him to focus on what we were doing. And honestly, I should have known what I was getting myself into, because
would he not talk into the mic, or
he wouldn't talk into the mic.
Yeah,
and, and also it was so weird. Like, despite, being very familiar with radio, like, and I was like, it's just like a radio show. Like, we're just doing a radio show. But I think he had a hard time wrapping his head around what exactly we were doing. And yes, it was hard to get him to like literally focus on the microphone and then just kind of focus on our conversation. I don't know. But
you should try again.
Well, but again, I shouldn't have been surprised, because when I filmed him for the documentary, there are a few moments in the film where you see footage of the sit-down interview that we did in his living room. We filmed that for, 3-4 hours. I mean, it was the better part of a day that I spent. And only a few little snippets made it in. I got much better footage just on the spot, in action at the booth. Like, sitting him down and like putting him on the spot and pointing a camera at him and not moving. I got some good material, but really where the gold came was just kind of following him around. Yeah. And so
in that little booth,
I think that's more conducive to really getting some great Jay content. So that was one piece of why he's not here now. Yeah. The other thing is, sometimes self-reflection, can be difficult. So for me to say to him, like, what do you think you meant to the customers who shop there? I don't know that he'd be able to answer that, but I can ask you, what did it mean to have that relationship with Jay? So I wanted to get that different perspective. And then logistically speaking, so Jay's no longer living in Hartsdale.
Right.
Very, very sadly, his wife, Alice, passed away at the end of 2018. And, Jay's now living with his daughter in Connecticut, but it's not like Stamford, Connecticut. He's like 2 hours away.
Yeah.
So
I saw
logistically,
I didn't know where that was.
Yeah, it would have been really challenging.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do this type of episode because I think it'd be interesting to get this perspective.
Do you know if did he get to keep the dog?
No, they found a home for the dog.
Oh yeah, it's like a nice pit bull.
They found a home for the dog, and I know they're in the process of selling the house. And Jay recently sold really the bulk of the comics that he had amassed. I mean, there were over 100 long boxes of comics in a crawl space, and he sold them to one of his former customers. And there was some really good stuff. He had, just as an example, like the Frank Miller Daredevil run. Like, there were certain issues he had like 20 copies of.
Yeah.
So we were joking about it. It's like, here's Jay Meisel coming. He could come along and like control the value, the market value of these comics, because he like controls a good bulk of the supply.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
How funny.
But so, Jay is, still with us, but not living one town over anymore. So, sadly, I don't know how frequently we'll see him over,
I don't know. I mean, I think of the past few years, because I had a kid 3 years ago, and that really put a damper on, like I basically forced my parents to come to me in the city. Like, it's just sort of like everything is about the kid's schedule. So I would get to see Jay once, twice a year tops, at his house, and he would just call me every once in a while. He would go, "All right, Jonathan, these bags, there's too many bags, kid. Gotta come up here." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out, Jay. My kid will take a nap, and I'll just zoom up to Westchester." So I saw him a few times at that space, and it's kind of funny, right? Like, he opens up a garage door, and it's like
it's like the booth
in the winter, right? It's bigger than the booth. It's bigger than the booth, but right, it's still pretty enclosed, but. I'm a little surprised and sad that I haven't heard from him in a while, but now I know why that is. Yeah. So I guess, does that mean that did he contact any of his customers? Because there are customers who had pull lists, so that still kept pull lists, but maybe they're like me. Maybe they kept it going just to keep the relationship going. Didn't really need the books as much.
Yeah, I don't know offhand, but I do know even prior to Alice's passing, he was planning, and I think he actually did close his Diamond account. So he did get to the point where he was not, because again, the market closed in 2013, and he moved everything, as you said, to his garage. And was still operating, but he got to a point where I think people were coming. So few people were coming, and it was so infrequent that he finally did get to the point where he was going to throw in the towel.
Oh,
I
wow.
believe he did actually close his Diamond account. So
wow.
I don't know if he let everybody know. I assume he did, but I'm not 100% sure.
Oh yeah, he did not let me know.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And you know, you could think about that in a couple of different ways. Like, you know, because I know how I feel about Jay, and I know how Jay feels about me when we are together. But, you know, I don't know if right, like if for him to call me, would that mean that we were close, that he was calling me, or does it mean that we're closer because he didn't want to call me? You know, and I think Jay is a complicated man with a complicated family history.
Sure.
So I think there's a little bit of that goes on with him when it comes to, you know, having relationships with other people.
Yeah. No, this is true. So, you know, for listeners of this podcast who saw Jay in either of the documentaries, you know what he's like. You know, for those who haven't, you know, we've been describing him and doing some impressions.
Yeah.
But I mean, Jay is this like larger than life character. You don't meet many people like him. I can't imagine many customers at the booth, anyone who spent more than a few minutes with him, easily forgetting him. I feel like he's someone who stays with you. He makes an impression.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And sometimes literally, because he would like smack your hand if you're like bending the cover of a comic book.
Meanwhile, he's not gentle himself with the books, which is funny.
It is funny. You know, because right, like I know in stores in New York, right? Like you will have people like I remember when I was working for HBO. You know, near HBO Studios down the street was a shop called Cosmic Comics, and you would go in, and every Wednesday, which of course is Comic Book Day, you know, you would see people, and there would be 50 copies of, let's say, an issue of Spider-Man, and they would be thumbing through every single one of those issues to find the one that was more mint than all the other ones. You know, Jay, you know, had a paper bag and he would take the books and, you know, with these like sausage thumbs, like, you know, like shove the book in the, you know, in the paper bag. And, you know, and I like that, you know, it's like this mixture of, you know, reverence, because you have reverence for these comics, but also like, you know, they are just pieces of paper that you read, and, you know, a lot of people throw it away. I think when I interned at Marvel in '94, I was on, you know, as an intern, we were on like the comp list. And so every week, and it was during the peak of '94, that was that peak time where everybody was selling comics on the street, you know, like it was just crazy. They were just printing crap just because, you know, there were speculators were insane. And so you would get this stack of books every week, a stack of books. And you would just kind of go like, ugh. Like comics, they're worth nothing. It's like they're worthless, you know, and you wind up just focusing on the ones that you like and that you really care about, and comics become special again in that way, you know. But like it's funny. So yeah, Jay, he would just take those books and just like shove them in a bag, some paper bag. You know, and really tight in there too. Like, you know, like all of my bags, you know, and he would keep those bags. Like sometimes he would, because the one that he would write my name on, it would say John B. You know, there would be like 20 books shoved in there, and he'd take out the 20, put it in a new bag, but he would keep the old bag. And I'm telling you, some of those bags were so worn and ripped from like him storing my comics in there for years. You know, it was hilarious. I would just say, Jay, he's like, give me a new bag. This is ridiculous. You got, you know, like got all these bags. Give me a new bag. But yeah, no, he was funny that way. Jay, so when you met Jay, he had probably stopped smoking at that point.
Yeah,
I knew Jay as a smoker almost the entirety of like the over 30 years that he smoked unfiltered Camels.
Wow.
And you know, if I had to take a guess, he probably smoked in the booth in the 70s and 80s. But I bet you at some point some regulation told him that he had to smoke outside. But you know, the breath and the booth still smelled like cigarettes. And just recently, I went into like a local sort of postal store. You can get a P.O. box, whatever. And that guy smoked cigarettes in the store because it was just, like it was grandfathered in. He could do whatever the hell he wanted in that store. And that place smelled, to high heaven of smoke. And I was like, that's what Jay's comic smelled like. Paper and smoke. And
interesting.
cigarettes. Yeah.
So the cigarette smell, not being all that delicate with the books themselves.
Yeah.
Always searching for something, because there was never a time that I saw him where he wasn't like, I can't remember where I put this. Like there was always something that he was forever searching for something.
Oh yeah, because like with the pull list, you would think that would be the most straightforward thing. It was basically alphabetical order, and but he'd be like, let me move this box from over here to over there, Jonathan, hold this, moving around, and but yeah, like I would be there for a couple of hours, and these random customers would come by, and the guy would be like, hey Jay, did you get me this thing, or did you get me that thing? And then like it would be like a half-hour process of him trying to like find this thing, and I mean he would almost always find it, but it was he was very funny that way. The other thing was that I think he did not have maybe the best system in the world of putting together everyone's pull list, which is why he would go to alternate realities, right? Like, I would be gone for, 3 to 6 months at a time. And, I'd have a run of, like, oh, here's Hellblazer, 141, 142, 144, 140, like, hey, what happened to 143? So, he would write it down. He goes, Jonathan, you don't come often enough,
Well, that's the thing too. It's not like he had, a great filing system or like
hates computers,
one notebook or anything like that. It's like scraps of paper.
Yeah.
That he would just write stuff down on. Right.
There were scraps of paper, but at least the pull list was in a binder. Like I always knew to go to the binder. And it's funny because I would almost be afraid to cancel a book sometimes, because like he would have ordered it from Diamond, 2 months previous or 3 months previous. So I would like sneak the book, and I'd be like, all right, I don't want, I don't want Web of Spider-Man anymore. Like cancel Web of Spider-Man, But a very, very unorganized. And, he was always trying to push. He goes, oh, wait, you like King Kong? I got a photo of Fay Wray. I got a photo of Fay Wray. She's beautiful. Veronica Lake. Everybody loves Veronica Lake. I was like, Jay, I don't need a Veronica Lake photo.
The last time I visited him at his garage, he gave me a photo. So I'm a huge Rocky fan, and I love Stallone.
Sure.
And he gave me a photo of Stallone. I forget the movie that it was from, but it's him like running through a field or something, right out of his filing cabinet.
Not Rocky Ford.
No,
it wasn't like a training
one.
sequence.
It wasn't that one.
That's funny.
But so so you said the movie posters weren't part of the booth originally.
No, I mean he always had photos, but then I think when I went away to college, right, he had a box, like a
milk crate,
and there were like these reduced posters, and I never really understood why he did that.
He liked them.
Other than but the posters themselves were not high quality prints of posters. Like they were whatever. They were like color copies in a mylar, hard mylar protector.
It was like 11 by 14. I think, the dimensions.
I never really got that. I never really, other than like the movies were good. Like it's like he's getting them of classic movies, so I think he would like to look through them to remember good movies. Like I appreciate wanting to see the good movies, but I think what was kind of unique, or maybe more unique, was that he would seek autographs, and then he really liked crafting the frames. Like he enjoyed cutting out the signatures and making special mats, and like he really liked putting together the frame. I think that for him there was something artistic about it that he could do. And so he you would see in the booth, it would be whatever, like a picture of Mickey Mantle, and the picture was like a cheap picture, but he would have, he would go to an auction or something and get random signatures, like, oh, Mickey Mantle signed some contract or something, and cut up the Mickey Mantle's signature, and then would do a die cut mat and put it in there next to the picture, and he loved doing that. He loved doing that. I'm pretty sure I bought my dad, a couple of J framed photos of like Ebbets Field,
Oh, nice.
For the Brooklyn Dodgers, because he knew, my dad was a big he grew up in Brooklyn, was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, so yeah, I'm pretty sure I bought a couple of those frames for my parents.
Yeah, I didn't know so much about the frames, but certainly the movie posters, and when the time came for the final move out, when the market was closing. So, I was there filming a piece of it, but I actually did help as well. And I carried those milk crates of movie posters. They're not light.
No.
And he had a lot, and they made their way back to the garage. But yeah, they were like these 11 by 14, reprints. Like you said, the quality was not great. And that's in the documentary. One of our interviewees is like the quality's terrible, but I don't think Jay can tell, or he didn't care. I mean, I think there was very much that sense of he loved these movies, he liked the visual representation, and he wanted others
a lot of film
to
noir
share that.
Yeah, no, a lot of good stuff.
I'm sure you witnessed this frustration on his part when others, didn't share that appreciation, or right?
Totally. I mean, right. I mean, I'm a different kind of a guy for my age, and certainly when I was younger, to be a teenager and know classic movies and understand who the directors are and who all the actors are, and then he would always complain about the clientele at
let's talk about this
at the flea market. I mean, he would go, I'm the only quality booth in here. What I've got is quality. Everything else is crap and sneakers and, I'm going to take a sip of water.
Yeah, go for it. But no, I mean, it's very true. And, that is represented in the documentary.
Yes, it is.
That was a tough moment, and that was a line to walk, because, he specifically calls out he calls the Latin population and the changing demographics of the market.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say that Jay was like a prejudiced guy.
No,
I think he was a guy who appreciated smarter people. I mean, he's an educated guy. He was a teacher. He wanted kids to elevate themselves, and so walking around the flea market, it's true. It's like, it's like a bunch of bums, right? like looking for cheap shit, and he was offering what he thought was classy material, classy things for, a different, like a different kind of person. And I think he was always hoping that, the customers would find him and, sort of like, be a little bit more fascinated with what he had to offer. And I think, at best, he would have people wanting a Batman comic or Superman comic for their kid,
But I think that's an important point, and so I wanted to make sure that we address that in the movie, because it's a part of him and his personality. But he says in the movie, he's like, I am a snob, but not a snob based on race. I detest ignorance.
Yes, that is true.
And I think for him, he spent all those weekends, right? So he was at the market Friday to Sunday. It was a weekend endeavor.
Right.
And so he would see all of these customers in the market either passing his booth by entirely or stopping, as he would say, like sticking their hands in everything and then walking away. And I think, that ate away at him. And I was thinking about this in advance of speaking with you tonight. At Alternate Realities, we would inevitably have people who came in and just browsed, right? But it didn't happen all the time. Like, we were next to a couple of restaurants. So sometimes, like, on a Friday night, a family would come in. You could kind of get the sense they're probably not going to buy anything. They're looking to kill time until a table opens up. But I would say, the vast, vast majority of people coming in were either our, like, regular customers or semi-regulars. They were usually there to buy something. But for Jay, being in that flea market environment where you're getting a lot of people coming in who are not necessarily, like, anyone who stepped foot into the comic shop, again, typically would buy something for the most part. But you have people coming into that market for anything. So I think seeing all of those people passing him by, I think it kind of eats away at you.
It's so funny. You know what? I have never. All of a sudden, I'm in therapy. I never really made this comparison for myself, but I think that what I do with the autobio comics, and because I'm just a writer, and I don't, and I hire artists in the scene that I'm in. Pretty much everyone is just like a self-sustained creator. They're both a writer and an artist, and there's like an auteur or artiste thing going on there. So I do a bunch of conventions a year, and there are people that pass in front of me all the time, like just all maybe they'll take a look at a book, and they walk on by, and I go, why wouldn't they want to take a look at it a little while longer? Why wouldn't they want to pick one up? Why wouldn't they want to flip through it? On that level, and it drives me crazy. And it's just one weekend, a couple of weekends a year, for Jay to experience that every single weekend. Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, maybe I think Jay was a guy that had. I think that guy had a certain amount of anger and passion about him as a New Yorker, and it was more like a venting tool that he would grumble about this stuff.
I don't get no respect like that.
No, right? I don't get any respect. But you would see a parent and then a little kid, and he would be. At first, like a parent would almost be shocked because it's like he's being mean or something. Like, don't bend the corners, but like the second that the kid listened and like respected what he said, and was actually looking at it with interest, I would see Jay give comics away.
Yes, he did for sure.
All the time, Jay would give comics away, especially to little kids, and that was a big, warm, soft spot, and probably by seeing that over the years, as I matured as a person, I just got to see what I got to see what a 3-dimensional human being looks like. Like Jay was a fully formed character. To me, not just a guy in a store. Like Jay was a real human being with all kinds of facets to him. But yeah, those are some of my sort of favorite Jay moments where he, like there'd be a little kid and you would see the way that Jay used his voice so pointedly, and that kid would be scared and the mother would be angry. And then there would be a switch, right? There would just be this switch where the kid got it, and Jay saw that in the kid, and he wanted to make sure that kid had something to read, and that was beautiful about him. Yeah. No, I mean that's well said, and it's very true. I mean, you could see him slap someone's hand away from a book and yell and curse at someone, but also being incredibly, kind and generous, and like you said, giving someone a comic and things like that. You know? So he definitely did have those. Yeah, I know.
Well, but in the past tense, in the sense that the booth isn't there anymore,
exactly.
Nor is the garage.
The business isn't there.
Jay, the comics retailer, is a thing of the past.
Yes.
Yeah. How, if at all, because maybe the answer is he didn't. Did he change over the years? In all the time that you knew, I mean, I guess probably the biggest change probably in the last few years. Would that be fair to say?
Maybe. I mean, when I started going, right, it was Jay and Shelley. So I remember being really scared of Jay because Shelley was the boisterous, friendly one, but at some point, and I don't know if it was like that Shelley. I think Shelley's passed, so like maybe it's okay to talk about him. But like, I think he was bad with money. Like, I think he, and I think things did not work out for him in life. And it became Jay's booth. And I remember being like, all right, I'll still go. If it's just Jay, but it was then that Jay saw that I was loyal to the booth, loyal to him, and that business, that something warmed up. And so it was more of a personal change that I noticed this other dimension to him. But as far as did he change from someone who, would slap your hand away to not slap your hand away? No, that, I think he was very consistent. He had some health scares, I think, because of the smoking of unfiltered, he started to get some emphysema, and I think he was deathly afraid of having to struggle to breathe. It really, really, shocked him to his core, I think. And that is something that changed, where he decided that, he wanted to live, and he wanted to live in a way that he wanted to live. And he stopped smoking. I remember thinking I could barely believe that he had changed that about himself.
How quickly and easily did he do that?
I feel like it was I feel like he went to a doctor. The doctor said, "You're going to get emphysema." And, you ever seen a guy with emphysema? You ever see a guy breathe at the end? Is that what you want? I think it was very quick. I do think it was very quick. I think, maybe there were other periods where he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm thinking about quitting." But I think when it was really serious, I think it was like that. He was like, "I am not going to go out like that." And he stopped. And that was a big surprise.
Did you ever drive with him driving?
I don't recall. I feel like going out with him to take a box to his car was as close as I ever got to driving with. I can't imagine what that was like. Did you drive with Jay?
I filmed him while he was driving.
So was he was he one of these people that screams at all the cars on the road?
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, but the thing that surprised me most, the guy's got a bit of a lead foot. He was going fast.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, this was from Hartsdale to the booth on 287.
Yeah.
And I was
demon.
And I'm sitting sideways with the camera, and I'm like, please don't let us get let us get there safely.
My dad is like that. I don't know why. And he was always like that.
Yeah.
The guy drives into my, into the driveway at the house, and there's a tree there. And almost every time you think he's going a little too fast, he's gonna hit that fucking tree. And he never does. But
yeah.
I'm like, one of these days he's gonna hit that tree. But I don't know. I could see that. I could see that about Jay, driving really fast. I don't know if that's a New Yorkie thing at all. Jay's from the Lower East Side. That's the other thing. When I went to NYU, and then after NYU, I lived on the Lower East Side, and so we would even, he would reminisce about that. He'd be like, "Oh, how's this street? How's that street?" And I go "It's there, street's still there. Katz's, Russ and Daughters." So.
Another characteristic of Jay, self-described Luddite, famously averse to technology. I assume this is something you observed at the booth.
Yeah, I feel like, he would have a phone at the booth, and you could try to call him, but he really had to be there, and he had to want to pick up, and it took him a lot of years to get an answering machine, and I'm pretty sure he did not really know how to use it. He used it more as a screener than an actual machine to rewind back. And I wanted to be able to keep touch with him once email was a thing. And he was like, I don't want that email, and I don't want that. And I was like, Jay, you have a good collection of books. I was one of the first people I feel that really adopted eBay as a place to get back issues that no one could find, right? And I was like, Jay, you have a collection of good books. You could be making money on eBay. It's not hard. I will, it's I'll buy issue Miracle Man 15 and then sell it for 4 times as much. I was like, you could You could sell books that you already have for good money, like, and he's not interested, just not interested in the web and the internet. And, like I would mention it, he would be like, ugh,
Yeah, he was and remains very critical and dismissive, I think, of a lot of modern life and modern society. He's been very vocal about the fact that he doesn't like a lot about our world today, and remains very much that man out of time.
Yeah. I mean, right. It totally matches with the fact that his interests are in older music and in older movies. But, I don't know. I want to be like, that guy's right. That guy's right. Movies stink, television stinks, you could say that, sure, he missed a golden age between, Sopranos and Breaking Bad or something. But, I don't think he's missed much. And the discourse that is out there on social media, I can't imagine there's anything of any interest to him.
True. Although
whatsoever.
surprisingly, he does have a Facebook profile. He hasn't done anything with it in a long time. He does. Again, he's not been active in a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But there was a period where he was like, he would write a birthday message or he would comment on a photo or a post. It wasn't all the time, but it was occasional, and it was like,
I can't even.
It was amazing to see one notification from Jay Meisel. It's like, what?
I can't even imagine it. I can't imagine.
So he dabbled at least a little bit, but again, didn't get very far.
Yeah, I'm sure he had no. He looked at that for 5 minutes and was like, "What is the point?"
Yeah. It's interesting. Again, I don't feel like you meet many people like him. Certainly not anymore. And we're in a time now of, of political correctness. And, there's a lot to be said, of course, for being respectful of others and of different, backgrounds and perspectives that people have. But there's also something to be said. I mean, there's something very refreshing about a Jay Meisel type personality who you never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Yeah, I love a curmudgeon, and I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm conditioned to love a curmudgeon because of Jay Meisel. Jay is my first curmudgeon. But I do love brassy people. I like people who, speak their mind, and that are not quite PC, like I listen to Howard Stern every morning and, have for 20 years. So, I do like that kind of person, but it's true. You cannot, unless you're like, some asshole like Trump, you can't really do that so much anymore. And I want to say, there's a part of that is good, right? I mean, that's good. Like, not everybody should say everything, especially when it's a little off color and disrespectful. But right, there is the romanticism of the curmudgeon, but I think the curmudgeon always has that good heart underneath.
I think that's an important,
that's
essential
always there.
part.
Otherwise, you're just a schmuck. Right? Like, if you're just 100% schmuck, then that won't do it. But Jay was not a schmuck. Jay was a curmudgeon with a heart of gold. There's so much good to him. He was not disrespectful to people. He was respectful of his space. And wanted you to respect his space. And if you did respect his space, he would show you equal respect and maybe even, leave you with a little something extra.
Yes. No, agreed 100%.
Yeah.
And, again, whether or not more people should be like Jay, I'm so grateful to have been exposed to him and to that type of personality. I think it just, I don't know, it gives you, you're able to roll with the punches a little bit more when you're used to dealing with someone like Jay. And, one of the things I was going to ask you is like, how if at all has Jay and your relationship with Jay shaped your worldview? And I think you kind of hit on it, the fact that, you're more open to a curmudgeon.
Yeah.
Probably because of him. And I feel like I've experienced something similar. I've gone to so many comic shops and so many great retailers who I've met, but there's always that little part of me that's like hoping to meet like a Jay-esque character, and I really haven't. You know?
Yeah, I mean, right, comic shop, right? Because a lot of if you watch The Simpsons, right? Like you've got the comic book shop guy, and like that guy is kind of full on schmuck, right? Like that, right. That's like that character, and there's a lot of those characters around. Like I remember going to a bunch of shops in Boston when I was dating somebody there, and a lot of those shops were like just these really, really like jerky guys that I was like, oh, I don't think there's a lot of there. Like, I don't think there's a lot. I think that that's who they are. But right, the curmudgeon like Jay, or like I said, like the comics that I do are heavily inspired by this guy Harvey Pekar, who's also a famous curmudgeon for not only doing his comics, but he would go when Dave Letterman used to have his show at 12:30 at night, on NBC. Harvey would come on and be this sort of national curmudgeon.
I think Letterman has said that was one of his favorite guests, right?
Absolutely, because he was real. He was a real character, and you're right. Like, and New York used to be a city full of those characters, and like you even look at like Bernie Sanders, right? Like Bernie Sanders is like Larry David and my dad. Like they all come from Brooklyn. They all talk, they all talk the same. From Brooklyn, and they talk like this, and they want to, they have a specific feeling about a thing. My dad is Larry David, in a lot of ways, and they're these characters. It's not the same. Like now, New York is like, I mean, like as much as one might be happy that Giuliani cleaned up certain aspects of New York, it did start this like landslide of Disneyfication of the city, and through that you lost so many artists and artist types, and I think a lot of these people have an artist's soul. These characters, all these characters, and I think like I go to Manhattan now, and that place is as homogenous as almost any suburb now. Like, Manhattan, I feel like Manhattan is not special at all the way it used to be. I mean,
it lost that sense of character.
Yeah, and I'm sure people have been saying that for 40 years. They said that, before I ever moved there.
Well, it's funny. Do you watch The Deuce on HBO?
That's what my dad was just an extra on The Deuce.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's like, well, because he's retired. Like he was sick for a while, and they kind of forced him into retirement. But then he like switched some medication, and he just woke up all of a sudden. So now he finds he doesn't know what to do. So he's trying out different things. He's like, well, I'm going to try to be an extra. And there's this show that they're shooting at Silver Cup in Queens. It's called The Deuce. And he literally met my mother. Like the first date with my mother was at a club on 42nd Street, and he's like, I waited around all day and I didn't see anybody, I didn't see Maggie Gyllenhaal, nobody. But it's funny, I've wanted to watch it, but it came out basically when I had my kid, so like it's like sort of like one of the things that falls by the wayside when you have a kid is that you do not watch as many TV shows.
I'm preparing myself.
Yeah, like you'll find out which ones are important.
Yeah. But that certainly captures a very different era of the city. So it certainly has changed a lot. But yeah, I mean, going back to what we were saying, I think very much, Jay, informed a lot, I think, about what I look for in another retailer, just as Steve Odo did at Alternate Realities. And I know you don't know Steve, but
he is a character. No, I watched a movie, and he's also a total character.
So very much a character, very much that curmudgeon, a little on a more cerebral level, I think. Whereas Jay is a little more like pow in your face.
Jay is pow in your face, right? Yeah, Odo. He seemed to know the books a little bit more. Like he would be able to talk about them, and
certainly to an extent. But both of them, that curmudgeon quality. It's not surprising that they spent all that time together, those Monday and Thursday visits at
It's
alternate
funny,
realities.
right? You would think like it could go either way, right? Either they see each other in their curmudgeonly ways and they appreciate each other, or they could have been, they could have been a couple of guys at each other's necks. But
Well, at times they were. There was
yeah?
some frustration at times, but overall, I mean, so much love there. But I think the two of them really, and as we're talking about it more, I mean, I think that really did inform a lot of what sort of like my baseline is, especially when we're talking about comic shops and the vibe of a comic shop. And, again, like I've been to so many great stores and none of them really fall within, the category of what I'm describing. And I can enjoy them in a different way. But I think sort of my starting point is always sort of looking for, for that, candid, unfiltered quality that you get from an Odo or a Meisel.
Yeah.
And certainly doing something like the podcast or the documentary, you want that unfiltered,
for sure, yeah.
willingness
No,
to
you
say
want
what's on your
something
mind.
special and extra. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's again, I envy you having that experience of really shopping there regularly. But I enjoyed my visits to the booth a lot. What about the fellow vendors there? Like, how, if at all, did Jay interact with them?
I think, there were a couple of vendors there that, there was a guy that sold food. So like Jay would get food from this guy.
Frank, the guy with the soft pretzels?
Yeah. That guy, the soft
for
pretzel
sure.
guy. And there were like a couple of old timers that I think that he appreciated, but for the most part, I think he I don't know that guy ever walked to the opposite side of the flea market. I mean, he was right by that door. I think he came in, he went to his booth, and then he walked out that door, and and that was it. I don't think he cared to really look around. But I remember when I went in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a lot more magic there. Like, there was more like it was more like what you think a flea market would be, where you would have similar characters. Like, it would be like there'd be this hippie lady that was an antiquer, and and she would have unique items, and it would be really interesting, as opposed to just somebody selling fake Reeboks from China.
Bootleg
DVD, just crap. I think the flea market really turned into crap when, but back in the day, I'm sure there was a lot of crap back in the day too, but there were more of these magical places with different items to see and look at. And even if you weren't really a customer of that kind of stuff, you were still appreciative of it. Whereas, I think the last time that, because I'm more of a curious person, I think, than Jay. I would walk around to see what was going on, and I would just remember being like, it's just like, like the booze would just kind of glaze over, like nothing special, nothing special at that place.
And that probably fed into his frustration as well, seeing the market, even if he wasn't fully exploring, but just kind of seeing that change as well. I'm sure that didn't help matters.
No, I think he probably saw it as, it matched with his view of a general decline of America.
Right.
Yeah, I think, the homogenization of things, the dumbing down of things, these were things that he was not happy about.
Right.
Not happy about.
Did you ever see anyone really get put off by Jay?
I mean, I remember one, it wasn't often, but I do remember there was one mother, right? Who, the kid was trying to turn a page, and, Jay was just himself. He goes, kids, don't turn the page. You're going to ruin the book. It's a $3, and the mother, I want to go oh, she's like the mothers I see where I live in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Park Slope, Brooklyn is very much it's like babies and dogs. That's all there is. And this mother was just became the most entitled human being on the planet, and really, I just lost my voice.
Yeah, no, that's quite all right. I mean, I have to say, like, while you take a sip of water,
Yeah.
like in the times that I observed him at Alternate Realities, I don't really think there were many, if any, instances where anyone was like necessarily offended. Like, I think there was one customer, and he was a regular customer too. I think he did complain to Steve once, like, oh, he curses too much. That was about the extent of it, though.
Right. Yeah, no, this mother was like super pissed that he had the audacity to talk to her child like that, and I don't quite remember if he apologized or if he kind of like blew her off, but I think it was probably more like he apologized like once, and like it just once, and she went on her way, and I'm sure he had nothing nice to say about that woman. But it'd be like, I'm sure he was probably like, that kid is in trouble.
Right.
Like that is not a...
I mean, in fairness, it's like Jay's not everyone's cup of tea.
No.
But I feel like the majority of people, I feel like, do come away enjoying their interaction with him, or I like to think that at least.
Yeah, because you just don't see these kind of characters anymore. You just don't see different people. I mean, I think like, I don't know, everybody wants everyone thinks they're unique, but everyone's the same. Right. and Jay is a real character. He is authentic, and I think people appreciate that about him, that he is absolutely 100% himself.
I don't know what your take was, and I would like to hear it. I mean, the last few years of him in the garage was sad because he held on to everything, but I was only able to do so much. There was a flea market in Hastings. It was an outdoor flea market that was, I think, like the first or second Sunday of the month over the spring and summer, and he did that for a while. So at least that was an instance of him, getting out there and trying to sell some stuff. But, for the most part, obviously there was no foot traffic in his neighborhood, and he was relying on the few remaining customers to come.
It's not like he had his garage door open, hoping someone would come by to take a look.
No. So, but, he held on to everything. And, I think for him, it was still, the reason he kept the booth all those years, it was something to do. He liked seeing and talking to people.
Yeah.
And I think that, also fueled the garage iteration of Jay's comics. But again, there was sort of that element of sadness, to me at least, that he was still holding on to everything. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was certainly the denouement of of his time with comics. And I mean, he had some health things. He he had a stroke.
He did have a stroke.
I mean, he came back from that stroke, but he did have a stroke. So I mean, I think it's just things age and things end, and that that can give anybody a kind of pause. So I don't know that I truly saw it as I think that would be more on me to read it like sad. Like I don't I think I was happy that he was still doing it at all. Like, I think it was, I was happy that he was, he was trying, and, and he was enthusiastic about, showing me, he's like, oh, I heard about this new Neil Gaiman thing. Like, he was enthusiastic about showing me things. So he didn't necessarily seem sad to me. And I think also we were genuinely really happy to see each other when we saw each other. So, again, there was more of that like family thing. So like, I think maybe you're experiencing, even though you spent so much time with him, there's still like, you were not really a customer of his. So maybe there's like a little bit of an outsider thing where you could like make that observation. And because I'm way opposite that as an insider, maybe I would be blinded to what was sadness, because I was just so happy to see him every time that I saw him. And I think, I feel like every time, we said goodbye, it was like I said, it was a very emotional goodbye. We had a big hug, kiss him on the cheek, Yiddish goodbye. Like, there's a real connection there. So, I might have chosen to not see it as sad, because I mean, him leaving the flea market was because the flea market ended, not because he chose to end his business. The flea market ended. So,
and he hated the word flea, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Would he just call it the market or
Yeah,
something?
the market. I detest the word flea. Yeah, he was
Right.
not a fan of flea market.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah, no, my I think that was, I mean, like it was called the Empire State Flea Market, and I'm sure that was just the vernacular my parents used. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
and
going to the flea market.
Right. No, and
That's what we're
literally
going.
is
Yeah.
the name. He's
Yeah.
just still objected to it.
That's very funny.
But
My comics don't have fleas. Yeah.
But the past few years, he's lost a lot. I mean, obviously his most recently and the biggest loss of all, of course, his wife. But
sure.
just his routine. I mean, the market closed in 2013.
Yeah.
A couple of years after that, in 2015, Alternate Realities closed. So
Right.
that routine of the Monday, Thursday lunches
Yeah,
gone.
yeah.
And then even before Alice passed, he got to the point where he closed the Diamond account. Now his wife is gone. They're selling the house. He's moved. I mean, it's been so much change.
Yeah.
Over this period of time, and you live a lot farther away. From the house in Hartsdale.
Yeah.
I've just been one town over in White Plains, and, I regret not going to visit him at the garage more. I mean, I would go
Sure.
when I could, and I'm glad that I went the times I did, in retrospect. And I guess this is not an uncommon thing. And again, talking about like seeing him as like a grandparent type figure, it's like, I wish that I visited more, because now that he's 2 hours away, the
Right.
opportunities to see him are so small now.
Yeah. Right. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I don't know. That's a sad, tough reality. I mean, I think that with my child, having been born a couple of years, it's like that already took away, one or two of the outer layers of people in my life. So I mean, it's like I put that kid first. I put my wife first. So, he is absolutely a family member, but I do not know where in my life a 2-hour trip to visit, because for me, a trip to Jay is sitting with him for a few hours. Like that is what the trip is. Like if I would go see Jay, I would tell my mom, like I was home from college for the weekend, and be like, all right, I'm gonna go see Jay for, short trip to Jay. And she'd be like, I'll see you in 3 hours, and that's what it was like. Like, we spent a lot of time together in that booth. And when I would visit him at the garage, it was no different. I would go into that garage, hang out for, a couple of hours. I made sure that I had, a lot of time, on the other side to spend there. But right, yeah, now in Connecticut, I do not know. I do not know what's going on.
Yeah, like I said at the top, this episode is a little bit of an outlier. The Jay's Comics booth doesn't necessarily occupy the same place in Westchester's comic shop history as some of these other heavy hitters. But, Jay Meisel deserved his due, and I'm glad we've been able to talk about him.
Yeah.
And, before we wind down here, I mean, was there anything else you wanted to share, any stories that you wanted to tell that we didn't get to?
Trying to think, I do feel like we've covered it. I do feel like we've covered, because covered when I first moved there, and what kind of comics I bought at the start, what kind of products he's had over the years, the changeover. I think we've pretty much covered everything. I think, anything else would just be random personal things like I think he really appreciated the fact that that I went to college, because like I said, I don't know that his son went to college, but I went to college, and for something that was artistic. I went to school for film and TV, and that I always had a job doing that, and then I had the interest in comics, and I interned at Marvel, and then I decided to make my own. I think he was a guy that appreciated that I was able to achieve some of the things that I
I think he respected that.
Be a part of something that I enjoyed my whole life, and with him. So I just always look at Jay fondly for almost more of the personal connections than the comic connections. So anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have to say, in terms of my visits and even the movie that I made about him, the comics were really the least important part
Totally.
of the whole piece.
Yeah, because he's that kind of unique human being.
Yeah. So to those who were lucky enough to, encounter Jay along the way, you were very lucky to do so. And to those who didn't, hopefully, this episode has given a little insight into Jay and his place in Westchester's comic shop history. So thank you so much for being a part of this. And thank you for making the trip up from Brooklyn to be here.
No problem.
I did one remote recording this season with someone out in Seattle. It was the only way to make it happen.
Oh, yeah.
And it was great. I'm glad we were able to do it. But being able to have this face-to-face is, miles better.
That works. You got a great setup here. You got nice microphones. I did a podcast like a month ago, I think with a guy from Seattle, funnily enough. And it was by Skype audio, and Lord knows how that thing is going to sound. I have no clue how, but here I've got cans on my head. I could hear everything.
Yeah. Well, that's what we strive for.
I have more of an accent than I thought I did.
No, it's great. It was so great to have you on the show. Thank you for being part of this.
Thank you very much.
Where can people go to check out your comic?
Yes, if you want to visit my comics, they're autobiographical, sometimes funny, sometimes touching. They are called Sew Buttons, and you can go to sewbuttons.com, and sew is S-O, because I start every story with, so this is what happened. So sewbuttons.com. You could read some free comics. You could buy some comics. If you're the kind of person that likes comics digitally because you got a small apartment, all my comics are available on Comixology. And go read a couple of my comics.
Yeah, they're really wonderful stories, so I hope people check them out. So thank you again. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to this episode. Be sure to come back in 2 weeks for another new installment. And until then, don't be a flat squirrel.